Among the many lessons of Parashat Lekh, which we read this morning, is the lesson of Abraham, who we tend to think of as, because he's our patriarch, a man of ideas, the one who recognized ethical monotheism before others did. But Parashat Lekh tells the story of a man whose values were challenged and who faced conflicts in much of his life. And many times, facing those conflicts, he needed to have the strength and the courage and the faith to stand up and fight for the values and ideals that he held dear. And it's an amazing thing that the Torah tells us this story of the first Jew, and immediately there is conflict, and immediately there's challenge. It's a reminder for us of many things, but I think in particular on this Remembrance Day, or this Shabbat in advance of Remembrance Day, where we're commemorating Remembrance Day at Beth Tikvah, a reminder for us that our ideals and our values are meaningless unless we are prepared to courageously stand up for them when they are challenged. So today, I hope that, and throughout the week, I hope that we'll keep in mind the sacrifices of many who today and in the past stood up for the values that we cherish, the values of freedom, the value of democracy, the value of life. We're living in a world today where all of these are being challenged in significant ways in many, many places around the world, and I think it only makes the observance of Remembrance Day even more important, and the importance as well of transmitting the message of Remembrance Day to future generations. We're honored today to have with us a veteran of the United States Army, Sergeant Shai Zachar, who is known to many of us in the synagogue because of his relationship with some very, very dear people that he's going to speak about, who've been members of the shul. But Shai is a great, great guy, and I thought it would be really interesting. Over the years, we've had wonderful speakers over Remembrance Day from Canadian Armed Forces. We had special ops here one year. We've had veterans. We have people who are currently serving. So why not mix it up a bit? These are interesting times in the United States. Why not speak and learn from, no politics, but why not learn from the experiences of a young sergeant who joined the United States Army, not necessarily, I'll let him tell the story, but not necessarily out of strong conviction, but in the end realized that the values and life lessons that he was gaining through his service were exactly what he was looking for. So please give your attention to our special guest, Sergeant Shai Zachar.
Boker Tov, Beth Tikvah. Shabbat Shalom. It's a privilege to be here with all of you today in a community that feels like home. Although I was born and raised in the United States, my ties to Beth Tikvah, as the rabbi said, are very deep. My grandparents joined this synagogue over 54 years ago, making Beth Tikvah a place where my family grew up and thrived. My mother and her siblings all went to school here, celebrated their bar and bar mitzvahs here, and my mother even returned here to teach. It's a community that has shaped my family into who we are today, and I'm grateful to Beth Tikvah for the values and connections it has instilled into all of us. It is an honor to be able to contribute to this incredible community. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Shai Zachar, and I'm a former sergeant in the United States Army. My journey began with the military when I was only 17 years old. Like many young people, I was searching for a sense of purpose, but I had no clear path forward. When somebody first suggested to me the idea of joining the military, I laughed at it. I didn't think I would be suited for it, but I decided to explore the idea anyways. And once I looked into it, and I saw the vision of myself learning in a dynamic environment, gaining unique skills and experiences around the world, I actually gave it a chance. I walked into the Army recruiter's office, and Army recruiters are known to tell quite the tale describing what life is like in the Army, and I know many people who curse the names of their recruiters and the stories and images they painted for them. But I must say, I owe everything to my recruiter. Although he definitely did lie to me, he saved me. See, I wanted to join the infantry, kick down doors, shoot guns, and be like all the guys in the action movies. But my recruiter looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was an idiot, and I was wasting my potential. So upon my recruiter's recommendation, I settled on a satellite communications job. My recruiter described the job to me as being a glorified infantryman, basically an infantryman but with more responsibility because I was in charge of communications. My job could not have been more different than what he described. My job was being in charge of an integral piece of long-range communications infrastructure, the absolute farthest anybody could be from combat. But I was thankful every day that I ended up where I was. I loved my job. And I got extremely, extremely lucky that I got assigned to the 3rd Psychological Operations Battalion. Psychological Operations, or PSYOPs for short, is one of the 3 main branches of the United States Special Operations. Their primary role is to push information out to foreign audiences to influence the reasoning and behavior of people, governments, and organizations. Psychological operations might sound abstract, but in practice, it's about something very fundamental: changing hearts and minds and influencing decisions to achieve strategic objectives. To illustrate what exactly PSYOPs does, let me tell you about a mission conducted by Army PSYOPs in 2011, long before I joined the Army. At that time, U.S. was trying to track down notorious Ugandan terrorist Joseph Kony. After months of little to no success, they employed one of the first formally recognized PSYOP divisions to come in and join the effort. They made the decision to target Kony's personal radio telephone operator, Michael Amono. After all, he knew everything about the organization, their schedule, their secret language that they used, and knew all about the way they disseminated information. Instead of tracking Kony or Amono, a feat which seemed impossible at the time, the PSYOP soldiers decided to track down Amono's family and convince them to help them get their son back. Michael Amono would then find himself walking through the jungle and hearing his own mother's voice being played on a loudspeaker, begging him to come home. Then came hundreds of leaflets being dropped and scattered all over Uganda, with his own daughter's face and uncle's face also begging him to come home. Seeing this, Michael Amono walked for 2 weeks through tropical forests to defect from Joseph Kony's terrorist organization, and within that same summer, more than 500 of its former leaders were either dead or on trial due to his aid, a true testament to the power of psychological warfare. I spent 4 years in the 3rd Psychological Operations Battalion. This is the only Special Forces Combined Capability Support Battalion in the Department of Defense. Now again in English. This means that all of the soldiers in the unit have backgrounds in fields meant to directly support and enable any special operations unit across all of the branches of the military. I worked with the Navy SEALs, the Army's Green Berets, the Marine Scouts, and even some foreign militaries like the Canadian and the Israelis. The unit put a large emphasis on cross-training soldiers and creating small combined capability teams where every soldier can do everybody else's job, so each team is capable of accomplishing any mission. Some examples of missions we assisted with were the training of foreign soldiers, creating and disseminating anti-terrorist propaganda, and working with foreign ambassadors and government officials. I've been deployed to the Middle East and done missions across the US, South America, and the Arctic in both covert and overt influence operations. I've gotten the chance to work on a wide range of incredible projects with some truly fascinating people. I've created products for training exercises with foreign militaries. I've worked with graphic artists and translators to print out mass quantities of textbooks with anti-terrorist propaganda to give to children. And I've even helped develop capabilities and new infrastructure for allied countries to increase their ability to defend themselves. Each mission carried its unique challenges, from cultural barriers to the dangers we faced on the ground. It was deeply rewarding work, but also humbling and at times overwhelming. Although my experiences have been very exciting, I've come here to speak in honor of Remembrance Day. Although I was extremely fortunate to have had an incredible Army career, every rose comes with its thorns. The military provides a sense of purpose, but it also asks for a great deal in return. Being a service member means enduring long separations from family, leaving behind the comforts and familiarity of home and facing dangers most people will never have to confront. Every service member understands the weight of these sacrifices, and we carry us with the knowledge that we might one day be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice for our country. In August 2022, I faced the heartbreaking reality of military life. A young soldier in my unit, someone bright, charismatic, and full of potential, took his own life in the barracks. His death was a devastating loss, and I'll never forget his memorial service. There's a tradition in these ceremonies called roll call, where a commanding officer calls out the names of all of the soldiers present. The room is resounded with each soldier's response. "Here first, Sergeant," until they reach the fallen soldier's name. Silence. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by his mother's crying. It was a moment of profound pain, a reminder of the hidden struggles so many soldiers face. Unfortunately, this did not mean we could stop doing what our unit was doing. Our unit had to keep preparing for an upcoming deployment and had to keep on carrying on. This is a tragedy we see way too often. Today, suicide is the leading cause of death among military service members by quite a margin. On this Remembrance Day, I ask that we not only honor those who fell in the battlefield, but also those who lost their battle with the mental toll of service. They, too, gave all that they had in the line of duty. This isn't the only way soldiers experience loss. While on mission with the 7th Special Forces Group in South America, I got the chance to be a part of a ceremony for a soldier who died while in an enemy raid of a U.S. compound in the Middle East. A few soldiers he served with were there, and were there to speak with me about his intoxicatingly positive attitude and unwavering work ethic. They spoke about how he died providing cover for those on the base, and how after everything was over, they chose to report no losses taken. They did this to disincentivize the enemy from attacking again. We killed many of them, and they killed none of us. This is how the United States chooses to represent themselves in the information space, by showing strength, by both being simultaneously an unstoppable force and an impassable wall. No signs of weakness or vulnerability. This is how they garner support from U.S. citizens and how they inflict fear upon the enemy, maximizing effectiveness and minimal price and casualties. I find this to be in stark contrast to the conflict in Israel, where Hamas has been caught on many occasions inflating the number of casualties suffered. They choose to stress the lives lost and the damage taken in order to garner support through sympathy. Me, you, the people of Israel, and Jews around the world know to only trust news sources that are sworn to the ethical bounds of journalism, who do their best to report on the truth. But unfortunately, Hamas has made accounts on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram which are not bound by the same oath of truth. They post constantly to push their narrative and their inflated versions of these stories, and often lies. And the sad reality is that where the majority of our youth this is where the majority of our youth are getting their news today. And in these places, Hamas controls the information space. Through this, they can rally ignorant youth across the world to wreak havoc for them. This is the power of controlling hearts and minds. This is the power of psychological operations. This is how wars are being fought today. They have planted seeds of discomfort in many Jews and Zionists around the world, as every time we walk out of our houses or log into social media, we wonder, are we going to be victims of anti-Semitism? Are we going to be victims of violence or terror? Are we going to lose more of the people that we love? Today, we also mark the 86th anniversary of Kristallnacht, a night that saw the beginning of one of the history's darkest chapters. 86 years later, anti-Semitism is still far from being defeated, and the Jewish community continues to face hostility and discrimination. Just two days ago, there was a pogrom in the Netherlands, winning several Israelis there to support Maccabi Tel Aviv. I consider myself very lucky that throughout my time in the army, everybody I encountered recognized Hamas as a terrorist organization. I've never had to suffer the reality that Jewish college students around the globe are experiencing. Loss in the military takes on a constantly shifting and dynamic nature. It evolves and adapts, especially in combat, where there is little room to dwell on past losses. Soldiers must keep their full attention on the present mission. A concept I deeply appreciate in the Army is the concept of what's important now. The classic example that is used to illustrate this involves a group of soldiers conducting a raid on an enemy building, moving through close quarters combat, room by room. Effective room clearing procedures require soldiers to advance steadily, securing each room until the entire building is clear. In this scenario, intelligence informs the group that a large group of enemy combatants waits 17 doors ahead. The soldiers become fixated on the prospect of this intense future confrontation, causing them to lose focus in the immediate room, leading to a fatal error. In their anticipation of the future, they lost sight of the crucial importance of handling the present. Though this example is extreme, it highlights the essential mindset soldiers need: an unyielding commitment to the present, giving 110% without becoming distracted by what lies ahead. I know on October 7th, countless Israelis had to confront this question: what's important now? In that moment, many chose to defend their country, putting aside their own grief and personal loss to serve, even if it meant suspending their own right to mourn in peace. This is a question that's not just important for soldiers, but applies to all of us. If you ever catch yourself too focused on the future and unable to focus on the present, ask yourself, what's important now? So on this day, I ask myself, what's important now? What is important to me while I stand on this bima in front of all of you gorgeous faces of Beth Tikvah Synagogue? To me, in this moment, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to all of you, and especially to Rabbi Grover, for this opportunity and for all the love and support you guys have shown my family throughout all of these years. Especially to my grandfather Emil, through the loss of my grandmother Barbara. I was unfortunately not able to attend my grandmother's funeral, as I was away at a training for a very specialized mission going on that I could not miss. So I cannot express my appreciation to those of you who were there and offered their condolences, and were there for me and my family while I could not. That day was a roller coaster of emotions for me. They let me take the morning off of training to watch the funeral's live stream, and right after it was over, I had to go immediately back to work. And within 20 minutes, I was being violently thrown against a wall and being interrogated about dead bodies in Colombia. Don't worry, the dead bodies were hypothetical and fake and all part of the training. But wow, was the need for what's important now mentality ever prevalent. The training, the interrogation, and the welfare of all of the soldiers at the training with me in that scenario were all I was allowed to focus on. I barely even got the chance to mourn before I had to go back to work and be 100% present for what's in front of me. This is just another form of sacrifice that me and countless other soldiers must make in order to be able to do our jobs. For me, Remembrance Day is a time to honor the sacrifices of those who served, but it's also a call to action. We live in a world where peace and security cannot be taken for granted. The price of freedom is high, and it is paid every day by men and women who put on the uniform, who leave family and friends behind, and who risk everything for a cause greater than themselves. It's also paid by those who serve in quieter, less visible ways, standing up against hatred and defending the truth in our schools, our workplaces, and our communities. Today, let us honor not only those who have given their lives, but also those who continue to serve, to protect, and to stand for what is right. May we remember the sacrifices of the past and acknowledge the challenges of the present, and remain steadfast in our commitment to a future of peace and justice. Before I go, I promised my mom and grandfather that I would tell at least a few of their favorite stories to you while I have the chance. Many of you might be wondering what it's like to be a Jew in the military. Now that's a great question. When I attended basic training many, many moons ago, they offered an option to attend one of a plethora of different religious services every Sunday morning, and to my surprise, they had a Jewish service. On my first week, though, I chose to nap instead. I was very exhausted. But the following week, I decided to go. I walked in, and immediately after walking in, off the bus, I get pulled aside by the rabbi, and he says, "Zachar, so nice to meet you. We've been expecting you." I have never been more confused in my life, as I just watched a full bus of people enter the synagogue, and not a single one of them was even acknowledged by the rabbi. So why was this man expecting me? Turns out, my mother had signed me up, without my knowledge, for an organization that provides support to Jewish men and women across the military. They had let the rabbi know that I was on my way to basic training, and he was very concerned when he didn't see me the week prior. After I put the pieces together, I sat down and was a bit surprised to see so many people at the Jewish service. So I began to talk to the people around me and ask them, "Why are you here?" Turns out, word got around the basic training companies that unlike any of the other services, Jewish service had snacks. And moments later, when the service concluded, they brought us all to a back room where some very generous Jews around the U.S. donated small little packs of snacks and bagels to Jewish soldiers. Turns out, in the crowd of 50 people, I was one of 3 Jews, one of which was the rabbi. I definitely got a good laugh at this, but got an even better one when I got to watch people who've never even heard of the language of Hebrew try and embarrass themselves by attempting to read the transliteration of various Jewish prayers, all in the name of snacks. Similarly, about a year later, while I was attending the Ranger selection course, I got put into quarantine. And although I had been in the Army for over a year at that point, they put me into quarantine with people who had just arrived for basic training and had to be quarantined before they could start. So we started to have what felt like a circle time where they were all asking me all sorts of questions about me, basic training, and the Army. And at some point, I recommended to them that they go to the Jewish service as they have snacks. And they have permission from a Jew to go and enjoy the snacks and learn a little bit about Judaism. A few hours later, I'm sitting in my room and I hear a knock at the door. It was 2 soldiers from the circle time holding a loaf of bread, and they said, "Hey, we took this from the kitchen but don't like it, and we assumed you would," as they held up a loaf labeled Jewish rye bread. I graciously accepted as I love Jewish rye bread, but I definitely got a good laugh as well. So this weekend, make sure you take the time to honor the sacrifice that all the past, present, and future soldiers make every day to work and protect you. I also urge you to think about how great it is to be Jewish and enjoy the snacks that will be provided after this service. And join me and the rabbi here for a discussion. I hope you all have a fantastic and meaningful Remembrance Day and Remembrance Day weekend. Am Yisrael Chai, Shabbat Shalom, Sergeant Zachar, over and out.
Okay, it was good. It was very good. A big thank you to Sergeant Zachar. He's not a public speaker. I think it's the first time you've spoken publicly before, and took a lot of time and put a lot of thought into composing his remarks today. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us, Shai, for the time you put in preparing that wonderful address. You've really enlightened us and inspired us about the meaning of Remembrance Day.